Dr. Flight. Hey, I hope you're all doing great. I want to put together a video here to supplement our material in the text and in the class. And this particular topic deals with collecting data. And so a big area that happens in all of business, of course, but particularly in marketing is the idea of gathering market-based information to be able to make strategic decisions on how to approach a market or a group of consumers in the context of competition. So marketing research is an entire professional field where billions of dollars are literally spent every year. Happens all over the world. Every single company uses the outcomes of marketing research. They either do it in-house or they subscribe to external services or hire external agencies to produce this information, or they do a combination of all those together, depending on the size and the scope of the organization. But literally every single company does an information process system where they either use internal data or external data, and they use that data again to make market-based decisions. So this is a rather large area or concept, and again, there's an entire professional space that's devoted to doing this type of work. So what I want to do though with this presentation is to talk about some of the different studies and techniques, I guess, or applications that researchers go through in order to provide this information, specifically from a marketing manager's perspective. So this is just going to be a compendium or a list of different research projects that you'll see commonly used in marketing, making marketing decisions from a manager standpoint. What I'm not going to do is talk about the nitty-gritty on how this research is conducted necessarily. It's again out of the purview of this video and a strategy class to really learn how to do marketing research, but rather learn how to use the information that marketing research provides. That's really what it is. So again, this is kind of an overview of different research projects that you might see. And again, this is not exhaustive. This doesn't list all of them, of course. There are literally hundreds. But these are some to give you an idea of the depth and the scope and the application of some of this research. So one idea here is to do a descriptive profiling or a descriptive piece of research that will typically involve gathering information based on a phenomenon that takes place, or a practice of some type, and or a sample. And the samples oftentimes maybe are consumers, or a market segment or a group of consumers, in other words. Could also, though, be focused on our competition. But the point here is that we want to do a descriptive analysis where we just want to describe whoever it is the focal point of the focus of the research is on, or our topic is on. So in this case here, you might have seen this idea of the 5 W's, and I added the H because there's an H in there too. But when we do a descriptive analysis of a group, who is involved, and this is again from a consumer perspective, like who's involved in buying and consuming, what are their choice criteria, so what are they looking for, what are the things that they want, when do they buy, this might be a behavioral type thing, but like when, how often, what time, in what capacities and such. Why do they buy the product? So maybe a motivator, whereas the what was the criteria for the actual product, like what features do they want? Why do they buy the product? What motive do they have? This is actually an enormous W, why. We spend a lot of time trying to understand what the motives are and the needs and the wants of the consumer. And that comes back to the why. Where do they buy? We apply that to things like channels, like where the product is located. Might also think of the context in which they buy, like if they're buying online or in a retail store or something like that. And then how do they use the products, the H? How do they use the products? Now, if you take these 6 different items and you spend a little bit of time focusing on each one of these, this will give you a very good profile of a customer. And again, you could do a descriptive analysis for any phenomenon, and use a structure that's kind of like this, where you ask the who, what, why, where, when type questions, and then the 6th how. But particularly helpful is if we're doing, again, customer segmenting. If we want to just kind of explain who our customers are, we can do this for our customers, but we can also do it for our competitors' customers too, and kind of do a compare and contrast as well. So again, helpful tool, one of many though that we do in research to help guide managers. Other things that we measure in research: attitudes and satisfaction. So when customers interact with a brand or a product or a company, they typically grow some form of an association, a positive feeling, a negative feeling, rooted oftentimes in satisfaction and how well they liked the performance of the product or service. Satisfaction is a key indicator. We measure it all the time. Plus, generally speaking, how people feel. So affect is something that you might come across. There are many measures for this type of thing. There's a lot on the screen, but here's one example of a measure. It's a semantic differential scale, meaning that there are opposites, and people choose between these two opposites. There's usually a scale in between, 1 to 5, 1 to 7 points, something like that, maybe even a 10-point scale in between the two anchors, the bad or the good kind of side of each one of these questions. And wherever you see this, like the first one says, this is a bad product, that's one anchor. This is a good product, that's the other anchor. And then the consumer or the subject would choose in between those two extremes where they feel their evaluation of the product is. So this is kind of like a satisfaction, but you can interject lots of different adjective bases or anchors to make scales like this. You could also replace where it says product, your brand name or your company name. So the focal point could be whatever you want to measure. Whether you want people to measure people's satisfaction with your like I say, your brand or some elements of what you have, and then again the scales. Here are 6 different items that you could use. This is a valid scale that's been used in research in the past. That's why it's here. But it's very flexible. You can do a lot of different things with it. Here's another example of some type of scales that you could use for satisfaction. You could use pictures. You could do just a single item type of a scale that's that's ranges between strongly like or strongly dislike. That's called a like scale. Or you could use other types of labels: happy, contented, so-so, unhappy, and things like that. So again, there's many different ways to measure attitude and satisfaction, but this is something we measure every day, all the time. It's a key performance indicator that we almost always look at, because the more satisfied a customer is, the more profitable they become. There are a lot of big good things that happen as a result of that. You could also measure loyalty, and there's a lot of other things that are kind of associated with attitude and satisfaction that we do on a regular basis. Okay, another thing that we do is likelihood to purchase or purchase intention. We oftentimes will manipulate some type of strategy, and then we'll measure its impact on likelihood to buy. So likelihood to buy, likelihood to purchase, purchase intention, or PI, fall under a whole class of outcome variables, where we change something. Like we use two different advertising messages, and we want to know which one has a greater effect on purchase intention. Or we change our price. We do this all the time. We change our price. We want to measure its impact on purchase intention. We'll see that a little later on here in this same video when we look at price sensitivity. We try different product features, and we determine, as we change features, its impact on likelihood to buy. So all of these can be managed and changed in a quasi type of an experiment, where we control for the changes and then we see what the outcome is in purchase intention. And then, of course, with purchase intention, here's an example of what we call a concept test. But the question at the end, how interested are you in buying the product if described above or available in a supermarket? That's a purchase intention question. And you can kind of see how it might look, where you check one of the boxes and then you get the response rates. And then we do a bunch of different things with that to forecast demand. So this is a demand forecasting model, but it's also a test, because for some people, I could have this description of the product. For a different sample, I could change the description with different features, and I could measure the effects of that change through the data. So it's a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful type of research that we do. Makes a lot of sense a lot of times to do something like this. I mentioned price sensitivity. This is another type of thing that we do. So you've probably been familiar with elasticity of demand, something that you would have probably first learned about in an economics class. And generally speaking, sales are tied into an inverse relationship to price. The more we charge, generally speaking, the fewer units we sell. It doesn't mean people's demand necessarily goes down, but what it does mean is that we sell fewer units. Now, the shape or the angle of that line, that demand curve is what we call it. The angle of the demand curve suggests that some people might be more sensitive to price changes and other people less sensitive to price changes. Or you might see this across product categories, of course. In some products, we have products that are more that people need regardless of the price, gasoline for instance, and we have other products that people don't need, like ice cream. And so fluctuations in price of ice cream have a big effect on sales. And those are, of course, products that you see on sale a lot with lots of deals, and like dollars off and things like that. Gasoline, you never really see deals with gasoline. Sometimes you see loyalty programs, but you don't see like pennies off this weekend on gasoline for a weekend sale. It's just because it's an inelastic product. But we also see this in markets as well. So some groups of consumers are more likely to respond to a deal. Others are less likely to respond to a deal. So that's how, again, in marketing, we kind of use this. Now, there's a couple different ways you can calculate this. I don't know that we need to go into huge details, but, again, in a test, or, that we've seen kind of before, maybe purchase intention tests, we change the price. We change the price by a designated percent change, and then we observe the percent change in purchase intention. And this is one way that we capture price sensitivity. So this is something, again, in marketing that we do. Here's two questions. It's really one question with two different prices. And so what we might do is take one sample at the $25 price, and we might do another sample at the $35 price from the same group of consumers. We just split them in half, and half of them get one treatment, the other half get the other treatment. And then we observe to see what the difference in likelihood to buy is. So that's kind of the idea. Again, there's kind of a lot going on this page. What's repeated on this page is the questions we asked, and what's repeated on this page is a calculation for elasticity. Now, there's a couple different calculations. So it's really the percent change in demand divided by the percent change in price. No, or again, what you see here is another calculation for price sensitivity. This particular example, the price sensitivity is 1.18, which is above 1, so it's elastic. It's kind of what we would say, although it's close to 1, so it's probably more something called unitary elasticity. But the point here isn't so much the numbers or this example. The point is that we use price sensitivity as something we do in market research to measure elements of the consumer, and different consumer groups, and see how they compare to each other. And the application here is if you have different customers, some customers you might want to offer a sale to, other customers you don't want to offer the sales to it because they don't need it. The more deal prone customers should be getting things in the mail and getting coupons and getting incentives to come into the store and buy, while our non-deal prone customers you don't need to do that with. And so we don't want to necessarily expose them to those types of things. Okay, a few others that we'll talk about here. Sentiment analysis. We talk about sentiment analysis. What we're talking about is, generally speaking, again, kind of like feelings or affect or satisfaction. We generally want to know how people feel about our brand. Again, are they generally positive or negative towards our brand? And in particular, sentiment analysis is very often a focus on qualitative data, oftentimes used in social media settings. So if we were to do that kind of again in social media or with qualitative data, which is mostly words, then we want to be able to analyze it using again analytic tools, software tools that will analyze words and the words that are said. And in essence, what we want to do is we want to calculate how many sentiments are positive versus negative versus neutral. And then we can calculate a sentiment score, which helps us understand, while the pulse of the feel, like right now, people generally feel good or bad, or is that trending up or down? That's kind of the thing that we more or less look at. As you can imagine, with the vast amount of qualitative data, and qualitative data tends to be hard to analyze, just in general, it can be really labor intensive. So with the vast amount of information that's out there through networks, AI has been used extensively to create algorithms that will pull comments from social media platforms and then analyze them for us. So that's kind of, again, it's a trending method or technique, but the application is something we call sentiment analysis. Again, you could think of it as feelings or affect towards our brand. Quick little example. I pulled some qualitative data from comments about a class, and I coded them, the sentiment, either positive or negative, and this was kind of not with AI, but this was just a small sample just to give you a real brief kind of glimpse of what this might look like. But once the data is coded, so this course is helpful, but probably wouldn't be the most interesting class. That's kind of a positive and negative. For me, it was helpful because my major is marketing, and when I graduate, I want to have some sort of knowledge in this area, and that's generally positive. And you can kind of go down if you want, and you kind of see what some of these comments are. But the codes then translate into a net positive or net negative result. So in this, there were 10 positive statements, there are 7 negative statements. out of it. So 59% of the probably close to 60% of them were positive, and there were some negative ones there. Oftentimes we take the difference between these two, so 18 percentage points would be different between the two extremes. And that's something we can do. Another thing we can do is something called content analysis, which is down below there, where you go through the data and identify themes that are associated with the words. So attitude, perception, career, degree requirement, and learning and knowledge. Those are four different sort of categories of thought that were expressed or in here. And what you can do is, again, you can apply some metrics and you can see, well, how often are these thoughts expressed. The other thing which isn't shown here is you can apply the affect or the positive and negative feature to those thoughts. So I'm guessing that degree and requirement's probably going to lean negative. Learning and knowledge, attitude and perception hopefully is positive. Career hopefully is positive as well. But the point here is when you do sentiment analysis, it's again typically qualitative data, and there's a good amount of information that you can get by culling this type of information from deep sources. Okay, another type of analysis that we do, there's sentiment and there's content analysis. There you go. Another type of analysis that we can do are product evaluations, and specifically feature evaluations. When we're comparing ourselves against competitors, when we're doing product development work, this is a big thing that we do. Where we're trying to decide the features that we're going to add to our product, we will often do some type of analysis. We'll ask consumers, how important is this feature? How well do we do on it? Is this something we can improve on? So on and so forth. So here's a list of features, cell phone features: style, look, tech support, operating system size, call quality, and telecom generation. So if we have G5, 5G, a 5G network capability, then the phone will probably be better than a 4G type of a thing. And column A, column B, you get kind of a composite score that is features either like we do well, so I'm satisfied with that feature, and it's important to me if it's the consumer. So this is consumer satisfaction based on feature and whether this thing's important to it. You'll notice in particular, operating system has a very high level of importance. And if you think about, like, do you want an OS system that's like an Apple operating system, or a kind of a generic other operating system that everybody else uses? That's like really important. That's a big thing. That's an important thing to understand, that you're buying an operating system when you buy a phone, and you need to know which one you're buying, and that matters. But on the other side here, when you look at importance of features, size, nowadays there's some variation in size, but it's not really like it used to be. You wanted a really small one, then people wanted really big ones, and now it's kind of like settled on probably a narrow range of size. And so if you look across the pantheon of phones, there's some variation, but not a lot. And so the importance of that feature is now not super high. And so regardless of whether you score high on that, if I scored really high on size of the phone, it really wouldn't matter that much in the big picture of things. But other things might, like tech support or call quality, or which generation you're running under. I mean, if we're coming out with G5 or G6 or whatever it is, and you're running on G3 or G4, that's going to be a big deal. That's going to be a real game changer for a lot of folks. So you can kind of see how we can create research that will help us create new products, but also kind of see where our performance is on the features that we have and how important they are to people. Following up on this, you can do the same type of analysis across multiple products or brands. So here's an example of the exact same features, but with the score available for iPhone, for the Galaxy, and for the Google Pixel. And now we can kind of compare across phone types how each one matches up to itself. So if I really wanted to compete with, say the iPhone, then the operating system, a lot of people like the operating system. That's important. Tech support, call quality seem to be high. Oh, style and look looks particularly low. They scored really low on that for whatever reason. And again, this is fictitious data, so don't read anything into that. So Samsung, like when they're advertising, they should really highlight their style and look because they're much better perception wise than the other two brands. So this is like, again, it's a competitive analysis, but it's also a tool that's used in a lot of different other strategy kind of formation methods. Okay, so again, this is consumer research. This is the type of stuff we do. Another area of product service evaluation would be service quality. So the last example dealt with like a tangible product, a phone in that case. What about if it's a service entity well, anything in the service industry, right? There are different ways we can measure this. So the most celebrated way, I guess, the kind of one that's been used a lot is something called ServQual. It stands for service quality. And ServQual was originated in the late 80s as a series of questions that we'd ask on a survey. And there are actually 5 different subdimensions of service quality. Each subdimension has a series of questions. And so you may use these questions again to ask your customers their experience with your service. You can do parts of this where you can just take 1 or 2 questions from each of these 5 different areas or subdimensions, or you can just measure one subdimension only if you want. So tangibility is one space, reliability, and again, you can read all this. I won't necessarily, just pause or play it back if you want. It's not a problem. Responsiveness, so like if you're in a service experience, do the service providers give you answers quickly? Do they help you promptly? Those types of things. Again, these are survey questions you can ask in a Likert scale, like agree to disagree, or some type of a scaling method that you can do on a survey. Assurance. Assurance deals with something where you have confidence that things are going to work out, or that things are being proven or shown to be reliable, or not reliable, but trust. That there's a credibility assured, I guess, that's built in there. And then finally, empathy is the 5th category, 5th subdimension. So empathetic feelings that are there. Note also, as a side note, as you're reading these, if you want, that if there's a little negative at the end, it just means that the item is what we call reverse coded. And so whatever your data is, it'll have a flipped scale. And so you can flip it back if you want. Or you can create these items to be all positive if you wanted as well. You could adapt the wording so that they're positive. So don't let that little negative throw you off too much. It's just a research technique that can be dealt with. Another item, kind of the last kind of big one we'll talk about here, and again, there are many different applications to research, but another one, again, in product development space, is something called prototype testing. So in prototype testing, what we want to do is have people try our product, or actually there's one other after this prototype. We want people to try the product to make sure that it works, that it does what it's supposed to do, that it does its function the way it's supposed to do. There's actually 3 different types of prototype testing. You might be familiar with at least 2 of these. Alpha testing, though, is a test that we do inside the company. It's usually with a concept or an idea, but we might have a physical element here. It's not in its completed form. but employees and stakeholders will look at the product concept and they'll evaluate it. It's an internal test. Beta testing is an external test, though, when we take the prototype to consumers and we let them try it. It's usually for a longer duration of time, and we want their input as to whether the product works, whether they like the features, and all of that. The product is usually in a more final state, although it's not a completely final state, but it's in a more final state when they use it. And then the final one, again, this one you may not be familiar with so much. It's something called a gamma test. Sometimes we need to test products until they fail, like it's a test to failure. If you're creating a new tire for a car, you need to know how long the tire will last until it doesn't work anymore. So that's something where we might do what's called a gamma test. It's a test of the product through the product's life. These are rare because they're expensive. They may take a long period of time, but you also want to know what the tolerances are generally of your product. So you may want to know, like, when will the product end? When will its life end and customers need to buy a new one? Okay, I mentioned there would be one more, and this would be just simply an idea of doing a market test. Sometimes these are simulated tests in a fake purchase environment, but generally what we want to do is we want to put a product into a real market, and we want to run a marketing plan, so a pricing strategy, an ad strategy, a distribution strategy. We want the packaging to be finished, all of those types of things. So in other words, we want the product actually in a market, and we want to observe the effects of our marketing plan and how effective the marketing plan is in selling the product in the market. So we'll do this as maybe what we call a soft rollout when we're introducing a product or bringing a new product to a market. We'll bring it to a small market first, make sure that our plan works, and then we'll extend it to the full market once the market test is over. So oftentimes we choose very specific markets to do this in, ones that we think reflect our market segment real well. And again, it's a test. It's a test to see if the marketing plan is effective. Okay, so these have been a good number of different applications that marketing research has. Again, there are many, many others, but this is a good variety. Just to give you an example of how a marketing manager will use market research. And again, I'm not focused on what the research is or how to do it per se. If you're a market researcher, of course, this is interesting to you. But if you're a manager and you're using this information, the question is, well, how am I going to use this information? What methods or projects should be undertaken for me to do it? Okay, a couple others that will extend further into, in part, there's something called a shopper basket analysis, where we study what people buy as groups of products. So if you go to a store and you fill up your basket, what are the things you'll typically fill it up with? We see a lot of complementary items analysis, like if you see products that go together, they'll be in a basket. Or on shopping occasion, you'll see certain things all purchased together. Advertising testing, I didn't mention anything there, but with something called A/B testing, it's just a methodology where you're comparing two stimuli and you're choosing which stimuli has the best reaction. In advertising, we want people to remember ads, and we want the ads to be effective to trigger motivation to buy or to do whatever the ad call is. So we're asking people to do something in an ad. How effective is the ad in encouraging them to do it? But then also something called ad recall. We want people to remember ads too. So there are lots of, again, applications of this, but we're comparing two different ads to see which one does better, basically. Two others, customer lifetime value, which is one we'll talk a lot more about. CLV is something that we want to, it's a calculation where we calculate the profitability or the value each customer has. And then finally, something called journey mapping, which is, again, very, very popular right now. It's a way to build relationships with customers. In fact, CLV, customer lifetime value, and journey mapping are part of a process called customer relationship management, which is a big topic that we need to cover in a lot of depth because that's kind of an important feature of a lot of firms today. Okay, so this video again was just a variety of different topics. Again, I hope what it does is give you an idea for some tools and some things that we marketing strategists and managers will need in order to make good decisions, but what is an outcome of marketing research activities. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Thank you, and talk to you soon.